It's about knowing your customer, but on a different level. It's not just about how well do I know them so I can sell them something else? How well do I know them so that I can build a differentiating relationship that will continue to grow? And instead of me having to sell them stuff, they're going to ask to buy it. Hi, I'm Jonathan Silverman. I'm with Microsoft Corporation, and this is the future of insurance.
Jonathan, it's great to sit down with you. You and I have a bad habit of starting a short conversation and like an hour later, we've solved all the world's problems, or at least insurance problems, talking about some interesting stuff, and we never record it. So this is a first for us. We'll actually have a record of hopefully some brilliance that we get to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
It is great to sit down with you. Before we jump in, I'd love to just share with people, who are you, what do you do? And I have to say, when people hear Microsoft and hear insurance, they're like, yeah, we use Word and Excel and PowerPoint and whatever else. But other than that, why is Microsoft relevant in the industry? And I know insurance is your focus. So tell us about you, but also why is, what is insurance and Microsoft together? What does that even mean?
Sure. So, Jonathan Silverman, originally from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I started my career in insurance many, many years ago as a life underwriter, and then moved into consulting, where I consulted for a large number of insurers. And I've been with Microsoft for the last 17 years, focused specifically on insurance. So to your point, when I go to an event, people say, well, Microsoft, we know you got Xbox, we know you got the Office suite, your Windows, what do you do in insurance?
Yeah.
Well, bottom line is Microsoft has a number of enabling technologies that support our carriers, right? When you think about customer experience, when you think about modernizing core systems with cloud speed and scale,
Yeah.
when you think about improving the claims experience, we do all of that. But on a day-to-day, whether you're filling your gas tank or going to the grocery store, there is a lot of technology out there that's powered by Microsoft. And we see all of that every day. So my focus is solely on the industry of insurance, life, P&C, specialty, reinsurance, et cetera, in the US only.
Mm-hmm.
I did a stint in Worldwide where I helped to define some of our priorities for the industry. But in the end, it's really about how can we help our customers and our partners use enabling technology to create value propositions for our industry, right? Whether that's improving experiences, lowering costs, even moving from a repair and replace type methodology to predict and prevent.
Yeah, which is, that's a huge topic right now. And I do want to get into that. You use the word enabling, which I find that coming up so much right now because people, I think that's the way we need to think about technology, is it's not to do a task or to do a job or produce something. It's about enabling some opportunity, something you're trying to achieve, some service you're trying to provide, and looking at it with that mindset is like, where do we want to go? And thinking about that is like, well, what do we need to allow us to do that? And that becomes much more, I think, foundational as you look at different solutions out there, thinking like, what could unlock things for us and make it possible?
Yeah, it's about business outcomes, right?
Yeah.
I think the key to being successful with customers is to focus on the customer need.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about, Microsoft. It's about my carrier and their challenges and how our technologies can help to enable the future.
Yeah.
Right. And help them to, focus on what's important to them. Sometimes I tell customers that, the experience is incredibly important and we need to work on that customer experience. And if you can change the customer experience, then you can give yourself time to work on improving the back end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that experience is critical. Customers can make choices and change carriers too easily, right? Yeah. And I believe that the carriers don't know enough about their customers. And I'll tell you a quick personal story. I got a piece of mail from a carrier that says, call us.
Physical mail.
Physical mail. Yeah. Call us, we'll save you $500 on your car insurance.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be fun. I called them, right? Yeah. And I had this visual of this one guy sitting in a corner by himself, just waiting for the phone to ring, right? So he answers the call, asks me a number of questions. His last question was, who's your current carrier? And my response was, you are. When do I get my 500 bucks?
Yeah.
And, interestingly enough, he came up with every reason why they didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And I basically said, after being your customer for 25 years, I'm incredibly disappointed.
Yeah.
And I now have a new carrier.
Yeah. That is, that's like the most basic, you should have known better moment. And it happens all the time. And it happens in plenty of industries. But I think what's so fascinating is we then go to explaining why, well, but the system's this and that's a different unit. It's like the customer doesn't care. You just basically told them like, we don't recognize anything about you as a customer. And we're going to show you how someone who hasn't been loyal to us gets a better deal. It's like, that's never nice. It's not
agreed. And if we can better understand our customer and our customer's needs, then we can provide more value to the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. When we moved into our house and got our internet service, like a year later, our service provider sent me something in the mail about giving us a free flat screen TV, like an LCD TV, which was a big deal back then. TV had only just been invented, basically. So long ago this was. And when I called about it, it was like, oh, that's only for new customers. And I was like, well, yeah. And the price is lower too. It's like, well, but you signed a 2-year contract. I'm like, okay, so I've locked myself into a worse deal and you're giving away free TVs for people who aren't your customer, paying you too much apparently. But so we do it in lots of different places, but that doesn't make it okay. Can we talk a little bit about, other than these moments, like what is you see across so many different carriers and types of carriers? I mean, you mentioned like all these different lines, and of course your purview is the US. I don't know if that includes North America more broadly or just the US, but what are some of the major things you see people grappling with right now?
So in my previous job, I did have worldwide purview, so I do see what's happening around the world.
Yeah.
But I look at our customers, and most often, right, they're talking about the customer experience.
Yep.
Right?
Lots of that the past couple of years for sure.
How do we improve that? Obviously, COVID and this whole concept of hybrid work has changed things a little bit.
Yeah.
When things first started happening from a COVID perspective, it was, how do you sell life insurance without seeing the customer?
Yeah.
Right. And there's situations and stories out there. There's a case study that we have where we were able to work with a large life provider to provide a 60-year-old healthy male with a life insurance policy in under 10 minutes, no liquids.
Wow.
Right. There are ways to do it, but that's where we come back to that enabling technology. What are customers thinking about? Well, how can I lower the cost of claims?
Yeah.
Right. And that again is an experience thing. Right. If I understand the legal cost of claims, the opportunity cost of claims, right, the way in which technology can support me, a lot of customers are saying, this is a bad experience.
Yeah.
Right. Our customers call 3 times, we ask them the same question.
Yeah.
Right. So how can you use technology to capture that data and put it into the customer record so that the next time the customer calls, we know why they're calling?
Yeah.
And we don't have to ask the same questions.
Yeah.
Right. So customer experience, cost, improved risk modeling, core systems, right? How many core systems are still sitting on mainframes?
Yeah.
And how do we create a modern experience for customers when our own internal experience isn't modern?
Yeah.
And then how do you attract the next generation of employee and customer when you're not thinking about those things? My daughter called me a couple of weeks ago. She got her first apartment. She says, Dad, they want me to get rental insurance. How do I do that? Can I call your guy?
Yeah.
I said, well, you can, but you're going to call him. He's going to ask you a bunch of questions, and he's probably going to want to try and sell you other stuff. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
She goes, no, I don't have time.
Yeah.
What are my other choices? I said, well, you can look at an InsurTech online or call the administrator of your building. because they might have embedded insurance
Yep.
where they offer you rental insurance if you're interested.
Yeah.
And she sends me a text message 5 minutes later saying, got my insurance, went through, the property management company,
Yeah.
$16 a month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably like baked right into the little portal she uses to pay her rent or like do her
Exactly.
requests.
All she has to do is say what her apartment knows.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so easy.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think that's what the future needs to be, right? It needs to be easy. It
Yeah.
needs to be valuable, right? It's almost like um, having the insurance is just a given,
Right.
right? I'm getting all this other value from my carrier
Yeah.
that the insurance is just a given, right?
Yeah.
Because what value do I get from the insurance if I don't die or I don't have an accident?
Yeah.
There's got to be something else in that relationship.
Right. And you're left with either like they never get the value for it. So what are the interactions? Paying a bill and some renewal notice that may just bother them because the price went up a bunch, or even if it doesn't, that's still not like that's not much of an engagement. Or we're left with a claim, which isn't a happy situation, even if it all goes well. But what can we do to change those interactions? Especially doesn't go well if you're asking the same information every time and not anticipating their needs or keeping them apprised because you can't, or your systems don't allow it, or different people are doing things. And so you couldn't transfer that information. You can probably, but not with the way you're doing it.
Right. And technology can enable that kind of stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
just think about all the recordings that insurance carriers make.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if instead of just recording it, you were actually transcribing it on the fly
Mm-hmm.
and filling the customer record, then you wouldn't have to think about it again.
Yeah.
And the experience that the customer would have would be incredibly differentiated because you would call, for example, and I would, be the call center answering, and I'd say, "Hey, Brian, how you doing? You calling about your claim today?"
Yeah. Right.
And again, it just changes the experience because now it's all about you.
Yeah.
I know who you are. I know why you called. I may even have an answer for you.
Yeah. You can add sentiment analysis, you can, like all kinds of things. It is about an unlock. And I think that's one of the things I'm curious to talk about with you as we look forward. So, all the changes going on right now, CX, move into the cloud, all these other things. And I hate to say, you mentioned like, core system modernization. And a lot of the times with all of these projects, what we're doing is creating like a digital twin for a 40-year-old offline cumbersome process. I've shared, I don't think I've shared this on the podcast. I overshare the same stories with listeners. So I feel bad because I keep hearing the same thing, but I think this will be new to them. I was at a carrier a number of years ago working there, not as a consultant. We were putting in a new system and I was like the business lead for it. And we got requirements from one of our underwriters about the quote generation and distribution process, broker distributed. So the quotes have to go out to the brokers. And he said, when I do the quote, I don't want to hit a button that sends it to the broker because then they'll bother me when they have questions. I want to hit a button that sends it to my underwriting assistant, who then can hit a button to send it to the broker. And I'm just like, because that's what you do now. You email it to your assistant, who emails it to the broker. That one button could have sent it under your UA's name. It doesn't, you don't have to send it to your UA for them to send it to the broker. We can solve for that. So we're not having a button that tells someone else to press a button. But this is like, this is the kind of thing we end up doing when we put in new systems. We just say, well, like, this is the way we work. So this is the requirement. The system must do that. Instead of saying like, we've got totally new options at our fingertips. What if we didn't have to work in this way that was probably designed in the 60s or 70s or maybe 80s if we're lucky?
So that's really interesting, Brian, because I think about core system modernization, right? And I think about Microsoft's journey. Like, how did we modernize? We're a pretty big company,
Yeah.
right? And now everything we do is cloud enabled. What was our journey like, and how did we think about it?
Yeah.
Right. And I look at carriers and I say, well, why do you want to manage your own data center? Number one. Number two, when you think about modernization, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Customers say, I want to be more digital. Well, I've been hearing that for the last 30 years.
Right.
Right? It started with going from paper to computer, then from a PC to a network, and then from a network to client server, right, to cloud.
Yeah.
And technology continues to change, and we as an industry need to adapt, right? So when you have a mainframe that's been sitting in your environment for 50 years, nobody knows how it works anymore. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right? Do you replace it? Do you migrate it to a cloud environment and give it a brand new veneer so that you can give the customer a new experience while you work on updating the back end so it becomes invisible to the customer? I mean, that's what technology can do for us.
Yeah.
It can help us make those quicker changes, right, to really satisfy our customer while we work on fixing the back end over time, because you're not going to big bang it.
Yeah.
Right? How many years did it take to migrate to that system?
Right.
Right. And if you're going to migrate to a new system, what's it going to look like?
Yeah.
And if you're going to migrate, are you going to migrate as is, or are you going to look to improve the process and the experience for both the internal employees, right, giving them the tools that they need and the information they need to make the right decisions at the right time with that customer? And what tools are you giving the customer so that if they want, they can do self-service, or you can actually work with them the way they're most comfortable, whether it's by phone, online, on their phone, right? Like their mobile device,
Right.
On an Xbox, right? Meet them where they are, where they spend their time.
That might be a bridge too far. People are on their Xbox. I mean, I guess not in the midst of a game, but you could have life insurance for your character in a game. I guess that's a new product expansion. But
Well,
I get your point. It's a different interaction.
Well, Brian, you're gonna laugh. My daughter was playing one of these games where she came downstairs to me and she said, "Dad, I just had to buy a house in this game for $100,000. That's a lot of money. I need insurance." And I laughed because within the game, right? Wouldn't it be really cool if you could create that realistic experience for a young person who is, going to eventually have their own place?
Yeah.
Right. The value of that purchase, the value of protecting that purchase, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not far-fetched to think that eventually we'll have games that teach our children how to do this.
Yeah. I don't think there's anyone outside of this industry who would agree with you about that being cool, but I think there were probably a number of people who are just like, oh yeah, that would make a lot of sense. So we're doing a little bit of dreaming here. When you look ahead, given how much of the current enablement landscape that you get to see and talk about, where do you see things going? What is it that we could be achieving, that we're sort of starting to unlock, like the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is? Where do you see things going in terms of possibilities?
So I think we're getting much better at using data, right? Think about how we're using photos for car accidents, for example, and how we can actually understand the details behind that, without ever going and analyzing the vehicle. I think technology is going to help enable these scenarios, right? I think a lot about cross-industry technology enablement. And what I mean by that is, I look at manufacturing and the technology there when I think about workers' comp and workplace safety.
Yeah.
Right? When I think about a home or a building, I think about smart city technology, or I think about devices that can help me to not only protect the people within those buildings, but to protect the asset itself, right? During COVID, we had a challenge in my home where we didn't realize that the chimney had collapsed, and we were getting carbon monoxide in the house.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize it. I was coughing for no reason. And my daughter started saying that, that when she blew her nose, there was this dirt that was coming out. And then 2 days later, my carbon monoxide detector went crazy, only to find out that the levels were so high in the house at that point that had we gone to sleep, we would have all died.
Wow.
Right. And that's just one example of how a device can not only save our home, but save our lives.
Yeah.
And I think we need to start thinking more about those technologies and how that data can help us move to more of a predict and a prevent type scenario where, like I've said to you before, I can't take tornado data or hurricane data and move your house.
Yeah.
Right. But I could tell you if there's a hailstorm coming through your area to put your car in the garage if you have one.
Yeah.
But I can give you advice on how to keep your family safe during one of these catastrophes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the kind of value I think the customer is looking for. Right. It's not just about protecting an asset, it's about what's important to me. If I lost my house in a in a hurricane or a tornado, I'm not thinking about my claim. I'm thinking about my family, keeping them safe, getting a roof over their head, making sure they're fed, making sure they're clothed, making sure the kids can go back to school. And then I want to talk to the carrier about my claim.
Yeah.
Help me with what's important to me first, and then let's go to the next step. But it really needs to be about that added value and that differentiated experience.
Yeah. I think, mentioning these situations, I keep thinking about having contextual awareness and appropriateness. And for some of that, there's, have we actually stopped to think about whether this is an absurd or an intelligent interaction? For example, years ago, I know someone who lost their home in a tornado and their carrier's like, great, we'll send a check out. And it's like, their house is gone. I don't know if their mailbox is standing, but mailing a check to their house right now may not be like, is there another thing you can do that doesn't involve sending a check to an address that doesn't exist anymore? And this. So that's, like, is this absurd or is there better options? But when you talk about the hailstorm, what if you, and your carrier who doesn't even know you're a customer, this is off the table for them right now, but it'd be nice if they got here. What if you have the auto and the home? And because you have the home, you know whether there is a garage or not.
Right.
And so you tailor that message, is put it in your garage or find a safe indoor parking structure. And maybe you even say, here are 5 parking structures in your area.
Correct.
Like a different interaction, because you're connecting these data dots and interacting with them as a human being who understands something about their life and their risk.
Right. And even on the life side, you and I have talked about this before, right? When my dad passed away, my mom knew nothing about insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Her thought was, I'm just going to call somebody and ask for my money.
Yeah.
But if the carrier was able to use data to recognize my dad passed, sent my mom flowers with a letter that says, we're so sorry for your loss. Your husband was a great customer. We really enjoyed his sense of humor when he came through the office. We know this is a difficult time for you. When you're ready, call this person at this number.
Yeah.
And we'll start your claim for you now. Well, what that would have done was, instead of my mom calling and saying, can I have my money?
Yeah.
Right. She'd call and say, oh my God, thank you for the flowers.
Yeah.
She'd ask about my dad and the stories that they might have to tell her about their interaction with him. And then maybe instead of cutting her a check, they'd have the opportunity to reinvest the money on her behalf, recognizing that when my father died, my mother became the customer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just data.
Right.
These are easy things for us to do if we understand where we're going to get the data from, and then what is that business outcome that we're going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that just a beneficiary or a claimant, or is that someone who I now have a relationship with or could have a relationship with? And what does that mean?
Exactly. Right. It's understanding your customer and it's a little bit of householding when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to reach out to the family, right? If you cover the whole family, then maybe you want to send them all cards.
Right. And I know there's people probably thinking like, well, we don't have stories about the father. Well, that's what CRMs are supposed to be there for. And like, maybe you don't have that. And so there are other ways you can reach out. I don't want people to swear it off because like, well, we wouldn't have that information.
No, everybody's
But you have
story is different.
something. Right.
Everybody's story and experience is different,
Yeah.
As I said, I did change my carrier after that, right?
Did you save $500 in the process?
Actually, I saved a lot more than that, to be honest.
Even better. Right.
Yeah. But here's what's interesting. I had this discussion with my new carrier.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago about providing more value. And when we had a hurricane come through not long ago,
Yeah.
I got an email with here are 4 steps on how to keep your family safe during a hurricane. And I read it.
Yeah.
Because it was a value proposition I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
And I appreciated it because they're not just thinking about my asset anymore.
Yeah.
They're thinking about me. It's more of a human experience.
Yeah. And we got people nipping at our heels in that. I get those before any winter storm here in the Northeast. I get one from my telecom provider, and I get one from either our gas or our electric company. I forget who it is. And I don't like working with either of them, but I get those. I've never gotten one from any of the 3 carriers I've been with in the past decade or so, which is like, you're the one who actually is most at risk here. You should say something.
When gas prices went up, I got a call from my oil company who said, listen, you're on, auto delivery, auto pay. With the gas prices, you want us to cancel that? And my response was, I still need heat.
Yeah.
So I'd appreciate it if you would come and fill my tank.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
But they recognized there's an impending potential negative experience. We should
Correct.
interact with this person. Yeah. Data.
Correct. And I think that's critical, right? It's about knowing your customer, but on a different level.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about how well do I know them so I can sell them something else?
Right.
Yeah. It's how well do I know them so that I can build a differentiating relationship that will continue to grow. And instead of me having to sell them stuff, they're going to ask to buy it.
Yeah. It's a bright future you paint. And the nice thing about it is it's actually so much of it is possible. So it's just a question of us, our willingness to engage.
Yeah, well, Brian, I don't like talking about the art of the possible. I like talking about the art of the probable.
Yeah.
Right? Like our technology today can enable these things if customers are interested. Now, obviously, we have to look at total cost of ownership. We have to look at the ROI. We need to make sure that, the value we're delivering to the customer can then be delivered to their end customer.
Yeah.
On some level.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's really important that we recognize, even as a provider of technology, that my customers have specific needs. And I have to anticipate those needs, right? And talk to them about what's important. These are the things that you and I are talking about today.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we can help them create differentiation and, even help them to create that differentiation that in a marketplace, elevates their perception from their customers who says, I want to be with that carrier for these 5 reasons. And they don't just have to do with coverage and protection.
Yeah. Jonathan, that's fantastic. And I know we could go on for at least another hour. So I want to thank you for spending some time with me. And these are really practical and real examples of how we can enable a different path for us. So thank you for spending some time today.
Brian, thanks for having me. I'd be delighted to do it again sometime.
Thank you to Jonathan for taking some time out of his day to share some thoughts with all of us. I love when the ideas that people share are really tangible and actionable and things that, like you said, not the art of the possible, but the art of the probable. And that's because the enablers, the tools, the building blocks are actually already here. It's a question of whether we are willing to engage with them, to use them, to change the way we've been doing things, to take advantage of these possibilities. So hopefully, Jonathan has sparked some thoughts in all of you. I know he has for me. And that's part of why we end up talking and kind of going down all these different paths when he and I get together, is because of all of these things that we see as possible right now or probable. That's very exciting. Like, what could we get going on right away? That's, that's really transformative for the industry. So definitely take Jonathan's ideas to heart, think about them in your context and say, what if we looked at this a different way? What do we have at our fingertips if only we could use them more effectively, differently, or to some different outcome or different ends? I think there's so much value in that. So thank you again to Jonathan. Thank you to all of you for tuning in. If you aren't subscribed to the show, now's a great time to do that. Leave a like, leave a review, but make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. That way you never miss great and insightful conversations that can help move the industry forward. And with that, I will see you next time. Thanks.